Hello, welcome to making your notebook sketchbook work for you. My name is Jess Smiley, and for the next hour or so, we're going to be talking about using a notebook and sketchbook to come up with ideas, to cultivate and grow and develop ideas for characters, for world building, for stories, and for other creative projects you might be involved in. So, if you're looking for ways to up your notebook and sketchbook game, you've come to the right place. By the way, welcome to my bedroom. I have a health condition that has kept me in bed for over 2 years, and I haven't been able to make it to LTUE for a while. And I miss it like crazy. So it's very thoughtful of you to be so accommodating, to watch from your own homes, just for me. Thank you so much. We're all in this together now. Okay, so I suppose a good place to start would be just a quick introduction as to who I am and what I do. My name is Jess Smiley, and I write and illustrate books for children and for young readers. And so if we jump over to Amazon here, we can see some of the picture books and graphic novels I've written and illustrated. Did some work for Adventure Time. I've done spot illustrations for other people's books. There's a children's bilingual comic book I did. My newest book is this blue one. It's called Let's Make Comics, and it's an activity book. And it has a lot to do with sketchbooking and using a notebook and coming up with ideas and turning them into things. So if you're into that, you might be interested in Let's Make Comics. And that's been translated into Basque and to Spanish and Catalan, which is pretty cool. And let me just apologize I'm going to be jumping back and forth between showing me and then showing my screen. So hopefully that's not too big of an issue, but I think it should work okay for us. So when I was 8 years old, my dad gifted me a journal, and he taught me how to write the date at the top and then write about what happened that day. I got a journal. That was my first entry. Hey, I got this journal. And you can write about what you think about things and how you feel about life in general and your hopes and desires and your dreams and all those kinds of things. So it took me a while to get into the habit of keeping a journal regularly, but I'd say probably around 12 to 14 years old is when it started becoming more and more of a regular habit. And so I had my journal where I was, recording my thoughts and feelings on life and talking about, the different things that I was doing and school and things like that. And then I also started keeping about the same time a sketchbook. And so it was, it had a pretty good tooth to it. Like it was a rougher, heavier stock paper that took graphite really nicely, and you could, smear it and do some nice rendering that way. But they were two separate things. There was my journal, there was my sketchbook. So fast forward to college, and college, I was basically like backpacking to each class. I've got like 7 classes, and my backpack, I had so many times where the straps would split and tear away from the pack itself because the pack was so heavy, or different seams along the edges of the backpack would split because it was packed with books, and a lot of notebooks and sketchbooks. And so, I had my I had a notebook for each class I was taking, so that's 7, 8 notebooks. That way I could take notes in biology and I could easily find my biology notes without having to dig through my history notes or my math notes or whatever. So I was trying to stay organized, trying to take college seriously and really, really get something out of it, So I had like 7 or 8 notebooks for classes, but then I also had my journal and I took that with me because, sometimes I could, college can be overwhelming sometimes, and it can also be really exciting. So there was lots to write about and think about. I was meeting lots of new people, so writing about, I met this cool guy who does whatever. I had a poetry notebook because I'm one of those guys who, I don't know, I'm into poetry and exploring that. And I had a music notebook for, lyrics I was writing, different musical progressions and things like that. I had my notebook for seminary. I had a to-do list notebook, so anything that needed to be done in my life, groceries, I've got a meeting at this point, this class was canceled and I need to do this assignment, whatever. That's in my to-do notebook. So you can imagine I've got like 16 notebooks in my backpack and that I'm carrying around loosely. Then I've got like the novel that I'm reading for class. Then I've got the one that I'm reading on my own for fun. Then I've got my textbooks, and I was just lugging these books around everywhere. And I thought it was organized. I was trying to be smart about it. But I ended up taking a typography class, and I actually took typography and a photography class and a drawing class all at the same time, and they all kind of converged. They all kind of became one thing, and I'll show you. I'll show you what I mean. Here's just a quick sped up tour of a sketchbook I completed a few years ago, just to give you an idea of what I'm doing in my sketchbook and kind of what it looks like. Not sure why the video quality dropped right there. I forget how many pages are in these sketchbooks, but that's a look at every single page real quick. I'm gonna go through it again here and just kind of point out, okay, so I have some character development here. I have some just drawing techniques I'm working on, some logo design, some magazine work, some website design, some flyers, some posters, some card games, some board games I've been working on, the rough draft for a comic I was developing, some more logo designs, more poster and website designs, a new comic that I was working on, a new story, thinking through character names and ideas, doing some world building. Okay, so all of that happened, all of that takes place between those covers. And that gives you some idea of kind of what I'm doing in a sketchbook. And I'll show you better examples, and I'll let you spend a little more time checking them out. But it's been cool I've been invited to visit, elementary schools, junior high schools, colleges, as well as different symposiums and writing and art conferences like this, where we get to talk just about sketchbooks. And usually I'll bring a stack of them, and I'll just kind of let everyone look through and pass them around throughout the whole conversation. So I apologize that you don't have that access, but hopefully we'll still be able to get a look at what I'm doing with my sketchbooks, what works for me. We're gonna get into, well, okay. So let me share another sketchbook video with you. This one right here, this is for my typography class. But I remember I was taking photography and drawing at the same time. And so what I did is I taped in this photograph that I wrote on top of. And then when you turn that photograph like a page, and there's another one and another, you fold this one out to the other side, and then you fold this film strip down, and it's kind of like this little experience, hopefully. So more than just writing on a page or drawing on a page, which is fun, and that might be all that you need from a sketchbook, and that's great. That's easy. You can do that with any sheet of paper and a pencil, or on a drawing tablet, something like that. But here I started to think in terms of like the book as an object, and how can I make this more experiential, both in creating, whatever it is that I'm writing or making, putting down on the page, as well as, how I'm doing that. Anyway, so when I've given this similar presentations in the past, some people say like, oh, so it's a scrapbook, and that kind of opens their eyes as to what they could be doing and how they could be using their notebooks and sketchbooks differently. Like a light turns on when they see that sketchbook and they think of it in terms of a scrapbook. That makes more sense to them, and it kind of gives them permission to approach using a notebook or a sketchbook in new ways, which is really cool and very exciting. And that's kind of the whole point of what I want to do here today is to provide options and opportunities for using your sketchbook. So so this would be a good time to ask, like, what is it that you want out of your notebook or sketchbook? And I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. A notebook is a sketchbook, is a scrapbook, is a whatever. It's all the journal. It's all the same thing for me. And I'll talk about that because this typography class showed me that what we were supposed to do for class was, if we come across some printed text in a magazine that stands out to us, like the font, for whatever reason, kind of jumps out at us, then we're supposed to photocopy that page and paste it into our sketchbook so that we could try drawing it ourselves and write down our observations about the font, just as a way of understanding it and learning about that font a little bit more. And so I did that, and what I noticed was that when I was writing my observations about the font, maybe it has a cool looking ligature, or the counters or the kerning, between letters, like all these fun things you can do with fonts. And I noticed that when I was writing my observations about them, I was basically making a journal entry, right? Because it's I'm just kind of recounting my experience with the font and just making observations about it. So it's basically a journal entry. And so I was like, oh, okay. So my class notebook is also my journal, really. It is, because that's something that I'm learning, and I'm going to be able to apply what I'm learning from this class to like anything in life that I experience. And so I also started drawing in that notebook, because you're drawing these letter forms in order to study them. So it also became like a sketchbook. So within that semester of drawing and photography and typography, my journal, my sketchbooks, my notebooks, my to-do list, my different class notebooks, all those things became one. So now instead of carrying around 16 notebooks, I could carry around one. And something really, really cool happened. By the way, I should point out that I'm not sharing this to tell you that this is how you sketchbook or this is the way to notebook. That's not it. These are some things that I've tried, and some methods that I've used, and I use some at for some things, and I don't use them for other things, and so we'll kind of talk about, depending on the nature of ideas you're working with, how you might use your notebook differently. So anyway, what is it that you want out of your notebook, out of your sketchbook? If it's just to doodle, for lack of a better word, with words, with images, with just like little patterns while you're talking on the phone or in a boring meeting, great. That's awesome. You should totally use your sketchbook, your notebook, to do that. Maybe you just need it as a journal. Just a place to put down your thoughts and feelings. It's cheap therapy. Keeping a sketchbook, notebook, journal is super cheap therapy. Before I was stuck in bed, I got to visit with a lot of junior high students in classes and doing assemblies and things. And parents would be very concerned. I have a junior high student myself now, and I can see where they're coming from. Parents would come up very concerned about some of the things that their teenagers were writing about, and it might be these dark, like grotesque poems or short stories, or just like maybe they have like a bleak outlook on life when they're writing, and the parents are rightly concerned, but it's also a fun conversation to point out, like, man, if the worst they're doing is putting these things into words, it could be a lot worse, and it does end up being very therapeutic, because once you're able to put those thoughts into words, once you're able to articulate them, you can kind of use them. You can put them to work in your own life, and you can also move beyond them once you've identified, oh, I'm going through this thing, and it came from this place, and that's super heavy and difficult to deal with. But now that you've identified it, you can build from there, and you can move on. Whereas otherwise, if you don't have an outlet for writing these things down and expressing them, there are much worse ways you could express some inner turmoil, Anyway, okay, that got super dark. It's just nice to know that you can take a piece of paper, and in just a few minutes you can actually improve yourself as a person. That's pretty cool, I think. Okay. Maybe you want to use a sketchbook as a place to write and record your thoughts. And they could be, thoughts of what something looks like, so you're drawing it. Or maybe it's a thought of a part of a world that just keeps coming to you. That, maybe there are trees that, they shed their bark, and the bark becomes something. I don't know what this is, but it's just like it's an idea, and you don't know what it's a part of. It's just like this fragment. And what do you do with that? Well, you could put it down in your sketchbook, and maybe it turns into something. Maybe you notice that it was part of something else down the road. But if you record it, you can always go back and you can start piecing these things together, or just spending more time with them and just exploring what that could be. A sketchbook, a notebook, I like to think of it as a place that you can go and explore and discover and experiment. I'm going to share here. I have these kind of guidelines, I guess you could call them, for using a sketchbook. So I'm gonna kind of go through the bullet points here of some ways that you can get the most out of your sketchbook. And this is something I did years ago, getting the most out of your sketchbook. So, one, I want you to think of your notebook or sketchbook as a playground, and it's your personal, private playground. And because it's your personal, private playground, you can let your pens, your pencils, and your imaginations run around. Run around free, okay? It's your private playground. It is just for you. So you get to do whatever. Try new things. Draw real big. Draw real small. Draw with pens, markers, pencils, and crayons. Explore. So again, the idea here for me of using a sketchbook or a notebook or a journal, this is a place where you can try things. And you have permission to explore different pens and markers and media and try different colors and try different things like that. It really does make a difference, and maybe we'll get into some of that. Put things in your sketchbook, pages from magazines, stickers, labels, etc. So this comes from my typography notebook, where you want to use that page as much as you can by putting things on top of it, by cutting parts out of it, by just trying different things and making it a fun experience. I'm a big believer that if I'm working on something, then I want the means to harmonize with the end. For myself, I want the journey to be as enjoyable as the end product or the end result. So if I'm writing a story, not only do I want the story to be super cool when it's done, but I want to have a great experience writing it. Otherwise, it's just work, you know? And there, of course, work absolutely has its place, and there will be times where it's just work to get through something, and that's fine. I think that's great. But I think a lot of the times we can improve our experience and make the process more enjoyable. Okay, I put draw, and I would also say write from life. So things that you see as you're walking around in the world, things that you actually experience. It could also be from photos and also from your own imagination. That also means your memory. So you're recalling certain things, you can write and draw from things that you remember, or things that you're imagining, or things that you see before you, or from photograph, all sorts of things. Try it all. I think it's important to not get stagnant and just to stick to one thing, and to just give yourself permission to just try this thing. Don't erase mistakes, turn them into something else. Now that comes from my drawing teacher. And she did this really cool thing. I remember in one of her sketchbooks, she showed us like a really kind of strange portrait of a very strange looking person. And she pointed out that she drew that while she was in the doctor's office. And so anytime someone sat in the seat across from her, she would draw part of them until they were called up to go back and visit the doctor. And then the next person who sat, she just picked up where she left off on the other drawing. So if she drew this person's arm and now there's a new person, maybe she'll draw the new person's other arm, and it becomes this cool hybrid. But she's just exploring. She's just trying to see things and record them and understand them as she draws them. So I like the idea of don't erase mistakes. Any of those little parts of and segments of drawings could be interpreted as mistakes. But the whole point is not turn it into something else. So instead of erasing things you don't like, instead of crossing them out, I should mention that in high school, I gave myself the challenge, which I've stuck with ever since, so 21 years, something like that, to draw directly in pen in my sketchbooks. And and to write directly in pen. And I did that so that I would hopefully draw more deliberately and have more purpose anytime I put down a letter or a line or some kind of mark. Hopefully it was a little bit more well thought out or planned, and more deliberate. So, and I started adopting that practice of, I'm not going to erase because I can't erase pen, and I'm not going to scribble it out because it's just for me. It's just my sketchbook, and this is what I'm trying right now. Okay, I put fill up the entire page. I think that's super important, whether you are making, obviously if you're writing a story that is printed as a novel, then on one of the pages it's going to be filled up with words. It's going to be really weird if on each page you only put like a couple sentences, because you're trying to take up like more paper, so you only write a few. Like, it doesn't make sense unless it works within your narrative, to have these parts without text. You want to fill up the whole page, and the reason for that is, there are a few reasons. One is you have to push yourself a little bit more. It's kind of like, yeah, you maybe you're squeezing all the juice out, but you're also cutting out each section of the fruit, and you're trying to unfold and open up that rind and peel it completely, use every part of it. And so you have to push yourself a little bit more. Instead of just making one thing in the middle, now you have to fill up all the other parts. And what I found for myself is that the things I do bigger, that if I draw them bigger or if I'm writing a bigger section of text, usually what I'm doing is I'm being a lot more specific. And then if I'm doing something smaller, it becomes more of a concept, more of an idea, and a little bit more generic and open-ended. And those are just two different types of ideas. So if you are filling up a page with both those big, specific, well thought out things, as well as those smaller kind of concepts, those ideas, now you're using different parts of your brain, and you're starting to understand whatever it is you're working on a little bit differently. I think that's pretty cool. I should also point out for this one, for the typography sketchbook, what I found when I started making my sketchbook, my notebook, my journal, was that when I wrote a journal entry on part of the page, and then I drew like a goofy character that I had in mind a few different ways over here on the page, and I have my grocery list, and I have like what I'm doing in one of my classes. What I find is that when you take all these seemingly disparate parts of your life and put them all together on the same page, they start to talk to each other. There's like this conversation that they have with each other, and you start to notice these meaningful connections between each of those things. And I feel like it's a little easier to learn from each of those parts because they're all right next to each other now. So whereas when I started college, I was trying to keep everything separate so that I could, that's how I thought I could be better organized, is, this goes over here, this goes over here, this goes over here. And I think there's definite utility for that. And that might be the only way that works for you, and it works optimally. And that's fantastic. For me, I found when I started putting them all together on the same page, I noticed more meaningful connections between all of them. And whatever I was learning in one area was strengthened by what I was learning in the other areas, which is really fascinating. And all you have to do is just write down the thing or draw something that represents the thing, whatever it is. Okay, back to this list. Fill up the entire page. Draw logos, designs, and letters. The idea here is that you are not only exploring whatever the idea is that you're trying to put down, but you're also exploring using a pencil or using a pen or using a marker. You're also exploring putting marks on paper. And you start to think about ideas differently when this idea is written in red and this idea is circled and this little thing is underlined. You're putting different emphasis when you use these different tools, and when you're exploring not only what you're writing, but how you're writing it and what you're writing it with. And so you don't have to get bogged down with, okay, am I exploring what I'm writing? Check. Am I exploring how I'm writing? You don't have to do all that. The point is make it about something bigger than just this story that you're writing or than just this drawing you're making. So, for example, one thing I like to do is it's just a simple little exercise. So if you're making a box, for example, or a square, I should say, if you're making a square, then a lot of times what I will do, if I'm drawing like 5 squares in a row for whatever it is I'm working on, then I might draw it this way one time, and then I might draw it this way another time, and I might draw it this way another time, or I might do it this way another time. The whole point is I have a different starting point and end point, and it's less about what it looks like when it's finished, and it's more about what are different ways I can arrive at the same shape. And so now you're actually thinking about writing or drawing a letter. You're thinking about the act of making marks on paper or on your screen. And I think it's worth trying. Even right now, you could just be doing little squares, start in different spots. Or a star. Stars are fun. You try and start in the wrong spot and see what happens. You pay attention to what you're doing differently. Okay, don't just draw, write. Jot down story and character ideas, journal entries. We've talked about all that. Last of all, make it fun. Enjoy the process. I've talked about that. Again, I think if you're going to be spending time with these ideas, then hopefully you're having a good time doing it. I realize I'm talking very quickly. I have some examples I want to go through. I want to point out that in junior high, I was not alone in the fact that I used my sketchbook not as a sketchbook, but as a portfolio. Now, I thought it was a sketchbook because it said sketchbook on the cover, and it was its own book, and it was its own thing, and I was making stuff in it. So I thought I was using a sketchbook, but I wasn't. It was a portfolio. And what I mean by that is if I made mistakes, I erased them, or I scribbled them out, or sometimes I would even tear out the page. That way, if any of my friends or anyone who wanted to look through it, they would only see my best work. And so it was a portfolio. And there's nothing wrong with having a portfolio. I think if you're writing and you're drawing things, like at some point you should have a portfolio. You should be able to show finished work. But that is completely different from a sketchbook, the way that I use it today, which is that it's more of a place of discovery and trying things. And Paul Klee, the artist Paul Klee, talks about, he says, drawing is taking a line for a walk. And that might sound like, super artsy or whatever, but I think it's worth trying. If you just take a sheet of paper and you take a line and you just move it all around the page, take it for a walk, literally. Walk it around the page. And you're not trying to make a picture, you're not trying to make a design, you're not trying to make it say anything, you're just moving it around. And it feels really good, at least to me and to most people I've talked with who've done this. It's not like it's liberating, like, drawing and writing is new to me, but you're just more aware of, okay, I'm putting marks down on a page, and this is a whole place that I can travel on, this paper, that I can move around through. And I'm not confined to going top left to the right, and then now down to the next line, left to right, down to the next one. Like, you can explore. And not just for the sake of exploring, although you can do that, but for the sake of trying to understand ideas and understand yourself. I think it works very well. I didn't realize I have so much to say about sketchbooks and notebooks. I'm not going to be able to talk about a lot of this stuff. I'm going to show you some specific examples from some of my sketchbooks and kind of talk about what it is that I'm doing as we go. So here are some examples. So a lot of the times what I'll do, I'll jump to this one. You can see right here it says 318 in the top right corner of the page. I usually date the page or the section of the page that I'm working on. Why is that important? Well, like I said, different things happen in your life, and knowing when they happen and knowing how they connect with other things in your life, they actually make meaningful differences that you can actually use. So it's important for me to track, okay, what day was this? What else was going on in my life? It makes things very helpful. Right here, again, like I pointed out, I'm not going left to right necessarily. You could almost chop up this page into little sections of, here's one idea, here's a different idea, here's another idea, and another. I'm just exploring. It's not about I'm not showing off for anyone. This is why I talk about this is your personal, your private playground. You don't have to share it with anyone. You don't have to show it to anyone if you don't want to. This is for you. This is all the behind the scenes stuff. I think of it as drawing from the inside out. You're starting with the skeleton and kind of stepping back and slowly build flesh on it as you understand what it is. It's like scaffolding, right? Because once you work through what is this thing, once you've worked through that, now you can make it look very nice with just the right words, or the right way of drawing it to make it look fantastic. You can put any skin on it, but you'll know the right skin to put on it once you've explored what this thing is to begin with. So a lot of these are ideas that, right here it says Happy Panda. This was a game idea I was working on. I don't know what Happy Panda means, other than the fact there's this little cutesy happy panda. But okay, maybe there's some game mechanics. Maybe you have to eat all the bamboo, but not the weeds. Mushrooms. What about mushrooms? I don't know. Something to do with mushrooms. I put it there. These are all just little ideas, and sometimes even just parts of ideas. But the point is that once I put them down on paper, I can come back to them and I can learn from them today, even though I did it like a year ago, for example. Here's one that has, some writing. I did a synopsis of an idea I'm working on, some little character ideas, and then I started drawing in a different style with a different pen. Just kind of doodling, just trying out different things. Again, it's as important for me to learn more about drawing and writing as it is to learn more about the thing that I'm writing or drawing. Here's one. This worked out kind of nice as far as it's like a grid almost. You can chop it up into these sections and it would make like a nice little grid pattern. And that was working on some graphic design for a realtor and logo design. Circling ideas using a colored marker. That's just a washable green Crayola marker that I stole from my kid. Circling ideas makes you pay attention to it in a different way. It's also kind of fun to just circle things. It's also fun to give each idea its own little space. Underlining has a similar effect, but it's different, especially if you have something circled and something underlined. You're going to pay attention to it differently. And I don't really question what exactly is it that is different about a circle, something circled versus underlined versus whatever. It's more just knowing that it does have an effect on me. It has an impact. And I just kind of go with it. as I'm writing and planning out a page. Not planning out a page, but writing and drawing on the page. And that's another good point, is that I'm not planning out, okay, on this side I'm going to have characters on both sides, and then in the middle I'll have some story ideas, then I'll have a synopsis, then some story. I'm just exploring this idea of these bicycles. And I am, as I put the ideas down, I kind of think, okay, I'll just kind of confine this idea to this area of the page. And then when I'm done, yeah, it kind of has a rhythm to it, and that's kind of fun. Not all of them are that neat and clean, and they don't need to be. It's just for me. It's not for anybody else. I'm just showing you some of these pages. Sometimes what I do are, let's see. So at its most basic, a sketchbook or notebook could be used for lists. Now these are character names that I came up with for a couple stories that I'm working on. And so I just listed names. Okay, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. But now I have a whole page here of all these names that I can come back to at any point. I also have, in a way, this is also a list. It's kind of a list of pictures, or a list of ways to make pictures even. And I have this pelican character in my story. And so, so here's some ways that I could draw him. That's another picture list. That's me drawing directly with Sharpie and a fountain pen. And I really like how the thin, scratchy lines work with the bold, heavy Sharpie lines. That's kind of cool. Same thing here, but I'm using a little bit of color. Same thing here, drawing trees and branches and vines, but I'm also using a white gel pen on top of the Sharpie, and that has kind of a cool effect. So again, I'm exploring not only what I'm drawing and how to draw it, but also the tools that I'm using. Here, this is mostly writing, but some of them are ideas, some of them are titles, some of them are synopses or descriptions, some of them are scenes. They're all here. They're all here on the page, and they're all kind of divided up, but they're also all there together for them to kind of talk with each other. In about 2013, I started putting these rectangles around certain ideas, and it just came naturally. It just happened. Instead of circling ideas or underlining or just leaving them, just writing them, I started putting these rectangles around ideas. And I noticed after a while that they all kind of, these ideas all kind of went in one direction. They all had like a similar flavor. And last year, I finally took all those ideas and I wrote the rough draft of a novel. So here I am, 100 and, what did it come out to be? It was like 180,000 words. A rough draft of a novel that later this year I'm going to whittle down and revise into a nice polished story. But they all came from these ideas that I started indicating the nature of the idea or the project the idea belongs to. And that's kind of cool. You can just come up with your own system, and maybe you circle it or put a star by it, or you use a certain color or something, and that indicates this idea is being used for this project. This was fun. I took a sticker sheet, and once the stickers had been removed, I placed the blank sticker sheet with the negative shapes taken out, and I wrote just these little ideas that became this short story. But I got to think in terms of, okay, here's maybe a scene or just a section of the story. Here's one thought. Okay, let's do a next thought. And it also kind of works, going left to right and then down to the next row. Kind of has this nice little rhythm. So that's just something fun to try out. You could try doing diagrams, taking a central idea and then breaking it up into, either its constituent parts or elements or just subcategories. Some people call this an idea web or a mind map. Here's a good example of one kind of thought out. You start out with a central idea, and then you branch off into a specific category that is part of that idea. And then from that category, you break it up into subcategories. And that can be a good way to think in terms of like first, then, next, and so. It's almost like you're constructing a sentence, which is a fun way to think. Here I'm thinking through story structure and different scenes for that novel. Same thing, I'm thinking in terms of, okay, percentages. That actually really helps me when I'm writing, because I know if my story's this long, then this section of the story should be about 10% of my story, which means it'll be this many pages, which means it's this many words. And that's really helpful for me because that gives me something to aim for. Just other sketchbook pages here. Okay, I think that's plenty, and we're just about out of time here. So hopefully showing you some of these techniques and these approaches and methods and ways of using a sketchbook and notebook and journal give you some ideas. My whole goal here is to give you idea-ria. I'm trying to give you the runs. That's my whole goal here is to help you think about, like, okay, how do I? Some people have a hard time coming up with ideas. How do I just, like, what do I write about? Okay, well, if you've got a sketchbook and you've written some of these things down from your life, story ideas, names, possible story titles, things like that, you can pull from that, and you can cull ideas and information from those lists. Some people have a hard time building ideas. Maybe they can come up with ideas, but like, how do I bring them together? How do I connect them in meaningful ways? Well, here's the thing: when you put them on the page, I was driving to a presentation about using sketchbooks and brainstorming, and on the radio they were talking with this psychologist who said something along the lines of that our brains have this really cool. They do this really cool thing. If you ask your brain a question, whether it knows the answer or not, it tries to come up with answers. So if I were to ask you right now, okay, where's the bathroom located in your house or your building? Like, you know where it is. Your mind can jump right to it. It might even conjure some kind of map or trajectory to get to the bathroom. And if I ask you, where's the bathroom at the library? You're going to think about that in a bit of a different way. You're gonna house that bathroom information inside the room information inside the library wing information inside of the library itself. And it's really cool how our mind categorizes things, but also how it tries to arrive at conclusions and tries to create some resolution or to understand things. So if you ask yourself a question on paper and you ask other questions on the same piece of paper, those questions, are going to talk with each other. Something really cool happens when you see them all next to each other. You might have an understanding as to the nature of the questions or the ideas. One other thing I was going to say about... Darn it. I forget. Yes. A lot of people are concerned with how do I filter good ideas from bad ideas. One thing that's really cool is if I make a list, like I showed you here earlier, if I make a list of names here, naturally some of these names are going to jump out at me. They're going to demand a little bit more attention from me. than other names. Same with drawings. If I draw a bunch of things, some of these drawings are going to jump out at me more than others. I don't even have to filter my ideas, good from bad, because the good ones naturally demand more attention, or those that have a certain weight to them or a certain type of meaning. They're going to kind of scream out like, hey, I'm right here, look at me, look at me, look at me. And maybe those ideas are worth circling or underlining or putting a star next to, or using a certain color, or putting a sticker next to it, or something like that. And maybe you don't even have to, because it's just demanding some more attention from you. I genuinely hope you're doing well. I hope you got something out of these 50 minutes we got to spend with each other. I'm online. I'm on Facebook as Jess Smart Smiley. I'm on Instagram as Jess Smart Smiley, and I have books available there. But I post a lot about my process and kind of my methods and approach, because I feel like each idea I have has different needs and demands, and I feel that my role is to fulfill those needs, to make it what it needs to be. That's my job, not shape it into something that I can do, which inevitably happens because we can only do what we're capable of. But my role is to have some sense, some understanding of the nature of the idea itself, and to make it that thing the best that it can be. I have an email list called the First Readers Club. I'll include a link here that I'd like you to join if possible, because that gives you access to my books before I actually publish them. I have some books coming out next year that I'm going to be sending out through the First Readers Club. And you can look at them before they're published and before anybody else reads them, and you can give me feedback as to how to make them even better. And I need all the help I can get, so I would appreciate that. Also, I'll include a link to the sketchbook guidelines, those guidelines that I pointed out. And that's it. I guess once you put ideas down on paper or on a tablet or something, you can always come back to them. You can catalog them. You can record them. You can categorize them. You can filter them. You can work with them once you've put them down on the page. But most of all, I hope you have a good time exploring. I guess we didn't really talk about materials. What size and what kind of sketchbook should I be using? That's a question I get a lot. It's a difficult answer, because the answer is whatever works best for you. And for some people that's going to be a toothier, a grittier, grainier paper that's heavier. Some people are going to like something light and smooth or slick, something with lots of pages. You're going to like something with a ring binding, or a perfect binding. You got to try things. I really like this size. This is a moleskin, and I just happen to have a bunch of moleskins, but this is like 7 by 9 inches, something like that. And I really like the size. So again, I was talking about when I draw something bigger, and it's usually more specific, and it usually becomes more of a finished drawing, which is great. But in my sketchbook, I'm not necessarily trying to make finished artwork. And this size seems just right for me to be able to draw some things and write some things that are kind of big, that take up a lot of space, as well as lots of things that, just little things. And so it gives me really nice variety. I'm stuck in bed, so I don't go anywhere, but it's very portable. It's easy to slip in a backpack or just carry around with you. But again, the goal here is to just try things. Find out what works best for you. What you want to do is find something that's accessible, something that you can easily get to and use, and that you will actually use. So it might even be my buddy in college had a stack of like 20 pieces of blank white paper and a clipboard and a pen, and he used that exclusively. That's one way to do it. I hope you learned something here. If you liked it, if you got something out of it, send me a sketchbook page of yours or a notebook page, or just tell me maybe something that you do that maybe I could benefit from and others could benefit from, or other sketchbooks you've seen that maybe you've learned from. Or if you just had a good time, I would love for you to drop me a message and just tell me what you liked about learning about sketchbooks and notebooks. I wish you all the best in everything you're working on, and thank you for joining me.